Bueno, in this lesson we're going to be looking at the Spanish gerunds, both how to form them and when to use them. But first, what is a gerund? If you think of it in English, it's similar to when we have an ing ending at the end of a verb. In English, sometimes called the present participle. But as we go through this lesson, we'll be wise to look at when the Spanish and the English gerunds are not used in the exact same way. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. So stay tuned for the differences. Creating the gerund is different than conjugating a verb. It doesn't matter who the subject is, who's doing the action. There's only one ending, one gerund ending, and it's connected to the infinitive, not any particular subject. There are also some irregular gerunds, and we'll take a look at those, but let's start with the regular. It's a very simple process to create a regular Spanish gerund. As you have always done with a verb, you take off the infinitive ending first. For AR verbs, you then add ando, A-N-D-O. For ER and IR verbs, you add iendo, I-E-N-D-O. And that's it. That's how you create a gerund. So let's put a few of these together. If we look at our English participle, we have some examples of singing, working, eating, running, writing, and living. The Spanish infinitives linked to those verbs would be cantar, trabajar, comer, correr, escribir, and vivir. These are all regular verbs, regular gerunds. So we're going to have cantando, trabajando, comiendo, corriendo, escribiendo, and viviendo. Now you try. Look at each one of these different infinitive verbs and try and create the proper gerund. Let's start with mirar, AR verb, meaning mirando. Vender, vendiendo, cubrir, cubriendo, bailar, bailando, beber, bebiendo, sufrir, sufriendo, borrar, borrando, and subir, subiendo. Que fácil. Pretty simple, right? Those are the regular ones. They're pretty easy. Let's look at the irregular gerunds. One of these irregularities that we need to look at is when the stem of the verb ends in a vowel. We're going to be making what is called an orthographic change. Do you remember a lesson on conjugating verbs that end in the infinitive in their stem in the preterite? We looked at creer and leer and oír. We're going to be looking at those same three verbs again, and it's going to have the same kind of change. The orthographic change is made to maintain how the word is pronounced. And just like we did for the preterite tense, we're going to replace the I, where on a regular gerund it would be I-E-N-D-O, and we're going to change that to a Y, making the irregular gerund Y-E-N-D-O. So we have our believing, reading, and hearing, the three verbs we looked at before. Creer, leer, and oír. And you saw a special verb pop up there at the bottom. We have the participle going, and the Spanish infinitive ir, I-R. So what are we going to do with these gerunds? Our orthographic change, creyendo, leyendo, oyendo, and the very special simple yendo, Y-E-N-D-O, is the Spanish gerund for ear. The other types of irregular gerunds that we have are when we have a stem changing IR verb. This means that the IR verb in the present tense has a stem changing conjugation. We've looked at these before. We know that we have E to IE and E to I verbs, and we have O to UE verbs. First, let's take a look at the E to IE and E to I. This is another case that is very similar to what we did with these types of verbs in the preterite tense. We are going to do a similar change in the formation of a gerund. If we have E to IE and E to I verbs, our infinitive examples would be decir, preferir, and venir. We're going to change the E to an I when we create the gerund. Diciendo, prefiriendo, and viniendo. So the E that would change in the stem of the verb in a present tense conjugation, we change to an I in the formation of the gerund. We also have those O to UE verbs. An O to UE verb in the present tense is going to go to an O to U form for the gerund, just like it did for the preterite tense. Our examples then were dormir and morir, and we're going to do a similar change and change it to durmiendo and muriendo. O to U change. There is one ER verb that's a stem changing verb in the present tense, poder, that's going to be irregular in the formation of the gerund, and it's going to become pudiendo, again an O to U change. Other than this special verb poder, any other ER or AR verbs that change their stem in the present tense, whether it's E to IE or O to UE, there is no stem change in the formation of the gerund, just like there wasn't when we looked at the preterite tense. Our examples of empezar and E to IE, tener, contar, and volver, both O to UE, become empezando, teniendo, contando, and volviendo. See, no stem changes there either. Now you try again. Remember the different rules. See if you can make the change. Dormir, durmiendo, caer, orthographic change, cayendo, pedir, pidiendo, ir, our special yendo, sentir, sintiendo, oír, oyendo, poder, special pudiendo, and huir, meaning to fall, huyendo. Sorry about that. Caer means to fall. Now we know what to do or how to make a gerund, but when do we use a gerund and when do we not use a gerund? As I said, it's similar to the ing form that we have in English, but it's not used exactly the same way. Not used every single time that we use an English ing. We're not going to be replacing a Spanish gerund or endo form in this verb. We do want to use a gerund when we're talking about ongoing action. In the example of estás jugando, you are playing. Right now, you are playing, and that is ongoing. We'll use the gerund there. If we have verbs of motion, and we'll talk more about those in the next lesson on the present progressive. But with verbs of motion, sigo leyendo, I continue reading. Or when we have an adverb. In English, we would add the word by, possibly in front of these. Escuchando, comprendemos. By listening, we understand. When do we not use the gerund? We don't use the gerund as we do in English for a noun. If I want to say, I love singing, in Spanish I stick with the infinitive. Me encanta cantar. I'm not going to use the gerund for the future tense either. We play on Tuesday. Jugamos el martes. I'm going to stick with either the present indicative or go on to the future tense, but not using the gerund. Or as an adjective. You want running shoes. We have an ing form there, but in English we're using that as an adjective to describe the shoes. In Spanish, I want to say, ¿Quieres los zapatos de correr? I want the shoes of running. The shoes to run. So these are examples when we do or do not want to use the gerund. In our next lesson on the present progressive tense, we'll learn more about how this is used and how we conjugate the corresponding verbs that we use with these gerunds. See you there. Que bien.